So, welcome everybody to Open Farm Sunday Live from the Allerton Project at Loddington. I've my Open Farm Sunday shirt on. Thought it was going to be lovely weather, but it's raining. However, we made of sturdy stuff in Leicestershire. We're going to have a look around the farm. We really welcome a bit of rain. It helps our crops grow. Come on, let's go and have a look at the farm. So we're in our agroforestry project here, and we're just going to go and do some shepherding of the sheep. And we've got some Ryland sheep over here that we've just purchased last week. But a little bit about the agroforestry, and if you just have a look around here, and we'll talk about it more in detail. Some trees here that are planted, we put bigger tree guards on to stop the sheep from grazing them. But this is a pasture grazing trees. There's a whole host of native trees in here. But let's carry on with our walk and go and have a look at the sheep. Hope everybody's well this morning. Hi.
So what trees have we got in here?
So what we've got is, I've got my son Andrew Jarvis, my cameraman here, and he's doing a sterling job. So we've got oak trees, we've got privet, we've got holly, we've got hornbeam, we've got maple, and we've got some blackthorn as well. These will all be, we'll have a closer look at them, but just come over and have a look at the sheep here. Actually it's just stopped raining at the moment, so that's pretty good. I hope the sound's alright. Obviously the technology, we only decided to do this late, so we're improvising a little bit.
Welcome to Barbara Crellin and Karen Jarvis, watching live.
Hi Barbara, hi Karen, nice to see you. So here we go. So these they're ready to be shorn, these sheep. But one thing about the Rylands is I call them chunky monkeys. They're quite compact, squat, and they mature really quickly, and they're a real fast-growing sheep. They'll probably get up and run around there, but I don't know whether we can only purchase these from someone else. We see this lamb on the far right, Andrew. If we just look at him. Looks like he's doing the boxing ring. You know, give anybody a run for their money. So we'll just zoom in on one of these trees, Andrew, while we're here. Can you get a close picture of those trees before they run away? Okay. Just talking about these trees here, this is a tree guard we've just put on. You just see the tree coming out at the end. We've had a lot of problems with sheep grazing them, hence we put a lot more guard on the top of it. We also, down the bottom here, had, would you believe it, problems with voles all the grass was growing up in here, the voles would make a nest in here, and then during the winter they wouldn't have enough food, so they start eating the trees. So they killed one or two of the trees. So we've had to try and make it so that these go right down to the ground and try and stop voles coming in. You can get proper guards for voles, but really if we lose a few trees to voles, you know, I don't want to put any more plastic down. You know, this is already plastic in here, which I think in the future these will be reusable and, on other trees, and we'll also have biodegradable ones in the future. So you've got to remember this tree will probably be around here for a couple of hundred years, so it's 10 years with some plastic on in the beginning isn't such a bad price to pay. Right, let's go, Andrew. We're going to carry on our walk. We're going to skip over the fence just here. Cheers, guys.
So how can these sheep help? Why do you graze them in somewhere like this?
Well, so obviously we need to keep the grass short, otherwise this pasture would get really tall. There's lots of other habitats around the farm where we're growing things for wildlife. You know, we've got big tall hedges, we've got flower mixes, we've got our natural habitats around the farm. But on some of this was an arable a grass and grazing field before, and so these are what I call our lawn mowers, just to keep the grass low, and otherwise it would get really quite tall. But you'll even see in here, if we just scan down here, what's in this pasture here. So we've got different sorts of grasses in here. You know, different flowering grasses. We've also got a little bit of buttercup, which isn't fantastic, but it's great for pollinators. You know, a few pollinators. We've got some white clover, and I did see some red clover around here a minute ago, but can't just put my hand on it at the moment. But you'll see even in that short little area of these clovers as well, that you've got several species of different grassland in here. I'm not sure what that one is there, but it's a different plant. Oh, a nice little seed head on it. So there's great variety. It's not just grass, and there's actually even a few little insects flying around in here, so great biodiversity even in what is a productive grazing arena. Okay, let's move on. We're going to go and have a look at the Leicester Longwools now, traditional rare breed.
Over the start.
Or over the fence. Just a word about the Romneys as they wander off into the distance there. They originated in Herefordshire, so they're one of the oldest breeds in the country. The reason I've got them is you'll notice how squat they were. I mentioned as well, I wasn't too complimentary about them earlier on, about their size and squatness, but they're a very ancient breed, they're a traditional breed. Genetic diversity in some of our livestock is equally as important as genetic diversity in our flora and fauna in our wildlife habitats. So if we scan round here, Andrew. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. So here we are now with the Leicester Longwools. One of these sheep usually comes up and says hello, but they're probably a bit shy this morning because they've got a lot of people, well, a few people watching. So once again, this is one of the rarest breeds in the United Kingdom at the moment, between about 500, 600, 700 breeding females. Leicester Longwool, developed by Robert Bakewell around the 1700s, early 1800s, where he took the best sheep he could find in the United Kingdom and crossed them so that they actually matured a lot quicker. Traditionally, a lot of people would eat mutton, which would mature over 2 or 3 years, probably 3 shears before they ate it, and it fattened. Now he managed to get these sheep maturing in 2 years. Of course, traditionally modern breeds will mature within a year now. But this was the start of some of our traditional sheep breeding programs. And the other thing that was quite interesting about it was that if you've got to remember that if we're hungry, we can go to the supermarket or go to our local farm shop or cafe or whatever and get some food, and it's always there for us instantly. Transport wasn't as good in the past, sorry. And also, if you were doing a manual job and you wanted something that would provide your clothing and the nutrition to keep you healthy, warm, then these animals had it all. They had the ability to make your own clothing out of it, and also if you were doing a very manual job, working on quarries, working in the land, basically spending most of your time keeping yourself warm, watered and fed, then these animals were the ideal thing just to have on your doorstep. Okay, well they all look all right here, so we'll carry on wandering through, Andrew.
So what's the difference? Why have you fenced this section off in the middle of the field?
So the reason we fenced some of these places off in the middle here is to just bring a bit of different structure. We'll probably let when we wean these sheep off their mums, we'll let some of these small lambs in here and graze this down in the months ahead. We tend to have a few smaller trees in here, so there's a bit more holly, there's a bit more privet. There's some more shrubby plants in here, so they give it, this wood is sort of 3 to 4 years old, and as it grows up over the next 20 years, you're going to find that this area will probably have a different structure to it, so it'll attract different wildlife. These trees around will grow much bigger, so there'll be little pockets of different height trees that will attract different things. Okay, sheep. Yep, they all look alright this morning. There's a couple of them sitting down over there, but they look quite happy in here. They've got plenty of grass as well. Okay, we'll wander over here, Andrew. So, yes, we've got cherry trees in here as well, and in fact there's an oak tree. We'll just have a look at this oak tree over here. This is one of our original tree guards that we put in, and we tried to discourage the sheep from by putting the posts at 2 different levels, so they would find it very difficult to get up on these. But as you can see from some of these trees in the past, the sheep have been nibbling the top of these trees off. Having a lower stocking density and having plenty of grass probably stops them from eating the trees, and those taller guards that we had earlier on, I showed you, meant that the tree can now start to get away. The lower grazing stocking rate means that actually we've got less pressure there's more food for the sheep, less pressure on them to go looking for something else to eat. So these trees are now beginning to get away, and I don't think we'll have to extend the tree guards on a lot of them. I think they'll get away. So oak tree here.
Nice scratching pole for the sheep as well.
Yes, well the Leicester Longwall was particularly good. I mean, we just a little bit of word about the weather, and I made a saying about it was I was going to play you Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head at the moment as an introduction to this, but technology beat me on it. The weather. So we have found that it's been very dry for the last 4 or 5 weeks and really wet over the winter. And the rain that we've had over the last 2 or 3 days is really welcome. I mean, things were getting past some of our spring cropping hadn't grown very well. So farmers always start having a discussion about the weather, but we don't have a roof over, we can't, some people can irrigate, but we have over a broad area, we can't irrigate our crops to make them grow. So I'm really happy for the weather when it's raining, when it's slightly cooler, because things do better when they're in this temperate climate, if it's not too cold or not too warm. And that same goes for biodiversity and wildlife and our fauna. If it's too cold, things like blossom and formation of flowers, the frost can nip them off. Insects, you'd think, would love it if it's really hot, but if it's too extreme, things like butterflies and moths, yes, they can do reasonably well, but sometimes it goes out of their range. Wildlife likes it in that temperate region as well. Right, so let's carry on, Andrew. We're going to carry on describing that. We're going to go and have a look at some of the arable crops now and some of our wildlife areas. Thorn. So you'll see if you pan round some of these trees now, they're just beginning to come out the top of the tree guard. And you'll see the area where there's been less pressure from the sheep. Look at that. Looks wonderful, doesn't it? We're hoping in the next, when we get out of this pandemic crisis, and as I say, when we unlock the lockdown, we hope we can bring people to Loddington and come and have a walk around and an up close look at what we're doing. This is just a real taster about what we're doing out on the farm. So we're trying to combine looking after the environment and producing food, because that's going to be the sustainable future. And it might be worth just saying something about greenhouse gases and locking up carbon. A lot of the issues associated with carbon dioxide and global warming, and some of the things that we can try and do. So one of them is to try and get much more efficient the way and use less inputs on the crops we grow. The other one is, can we lock up some of this carbon in our soil with organic matter, extra grass? And the other thing is, can we lock it up in some of these trees? A lot of carbon in trees, so over the years, that's why there's so much talk about how many trees to grow in the future, because we'll be having much more trees growing up, taking in the sunlight, locking up carbon, taking it out of the atmosphere. So the CO2 is converted into the produce on the ground here, in soil carbon and in the carbon in the trees. And the final thing that we can do as farmers is produce renewable energy. So we can harvest the sunlight, grow the carbon, keep growing it, rather than using finite resources like coal. Right, let's carry on, Andrew. In fact, I think we'll go across to the buttercup meadow here, which I'd like to say was designed, a really well-designed project, but it's what happens when you don't put a lot of pressure on. You'll see there is buttercups in here, but they've probably been nipped away by the sheep. On a lot of productive, high output farms, you would find that a lot of this buttercup would be sprayed off or taken out, because you can see here it's just taken out where the grass would be growing. So on some other pastures that people have cultivated for high input and output farms, you might not see this, and you can see the buttercups over here where we kept the sheep out for a few months now, and they've been ungrazed. They can see the sort of the visual effects of these buttercups. The other thing was, a few months ago, probably about 8 weeks ago, we had lots of flowers in here. Were called lady's bed straw, and it was a little light, slightly tingy purpley colour, like this sort of hue on here, and the place was littered with it. They've now finished flowering, and they'll come back again next year. So let's just have a look over here, Andrew, and have a look at the buttercups here. So this is a grand tree, this one, isn't it? Look at it. Fantastic, and it's going to get, so that's good, some good growth. I mean, there is some silver birch in here as well, but We're just moving over here to look at one of the shelter belts, mature belts. So this shelter belt in the background here has got trees that are over. Some of the taller trees were probably 80 to 100, possibly 150 years old. The smaller trees that just cherry, ash, oak were planted when I first came here in 1992. And then right in front of us is some of the shrubby, lower sort of maples and the thorns and the hazel. I'll just see whether we can identify a hazel. There's just a hazel over here, Andrew. This one here. So this hazel over here got loads of different uses. We all know about hazelnuts, but when we'll take this guard off, not too long actually, and we'll cut it off and coppice it. They call coppicing it. You cut it off at the bottom, and basically the hazel plant, and instead of having 1 or 2 shoots, then we'll probably have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and they'll all grow up in a nice bushy clump. And we can use these for the craft of hedge laying. You can use them for staking the hedge. When we cut and lay the hedge down, we use these, and you cut them every 7 years, they grow up again, and there's always a renewable source of a product. So rather than actually using something which is finite or using concrete or plastics, there's a great place for using wood in our building materials and some of our farmland exploits in the future. Right, how are we doing on time, Andrew? How long have we been going?
16 minutes.
So 16 minutes, are we all having fun? Hope so. Come on, let's go and have a look at some arable crops and have a wander down. So here's a nice oak tree just coming out the top here. 2 much higher stakes now, so the sheep can't get up on them. Oaks coming out the top, looks really well. We did have a bit of a problem with some of the very windy weather we had and some of the frost, where a lot of these, anything that was exposed to the elements was actually getting quite parched and showing signs of stress and a bit of purpling. But now the weather's been so nice, it's beginning to grow through all that. And now we haven't got the permanent guard all the way down here. We're finding as much more light gets in here. I think we'll stop so much grass growing up here, and we'll stop that business with some of the small rodents nesting in here and eating the trees. I mean, as you can see, there's plenty of places for them to nest, but we want to try and get some of these trees away. Okay. Yeah, so we're gonna have a look at a couple more stops, so probably another 15 minutes, and then we're gonna go offline. But we're going to wander down through here and have a look at some of our shrubby areas that have been planted for about 10 years. So you'll see how much things can grow in 10 years.
Happy to take questions if any come through.
Thank you, yep, more than happy. So some of our hedgerows as well have, we've planted things like the odd pear tree, the odd apple tree, and we might just finish off before we leave the agroforestry project here to say that this project has really been designed with looking at some experimental work on how much shade things offer, how much insects, how much habitat, how long this grass exists for us to use it for grazing before it's the canopy shields all the grass and then the light doesn't get through. I would imagine it'll take 15 or 20 years before that happens at least. But there are different ways of dealing with agroforestry, so you might see lots of trees planted in arable fields every 24 metres apart in very straight rows, which means that we can farm between the rows, still get combines in there and still get all the other farm machinery we need, but we can grow apples, we can grow pears, we can grow other fruit trees, plum trees, we can grow nuts. So the things that sort of grow in this country would be hazelnuts and walnuts would be the main things. So they're all good for a varied diet. But they're also, rather than just using that one layer that we're growing crops out of, we'll be able to grow things slightly more vertically. So you're getting another way of actually increasing the area and output from your farmland. So yeah, so apples, nuts, and also the other thing I mentioned is, you know, the health and well-being value of somewhere like this. You know, to actually be able to wander through these areas and talk to people about what's going on right outside their doorstep and about the impact and the changes that we might have to make in our diet and how we live our lives, how we travel around to reduce our own, because it isn't just going to be about farming solving something, it isn't just going to be about individuals solving something. We're going to collectively have to look at how we heat our homes, how we, the clothing that we wear, transport, flying, and how we fly, and how we can be much more conscious of our environmental footprint. Because if we don't, we can just see that global warming is going to cause us a lot of problems, and there could be a lot of trouble ahead. So we're now leaving the grassland area, so we'll say goodbye to the sheep. Cheerio sheep, thank you very much. It was nice to see that you were all behaving yourselves. Always a bit of a risk when you're shepherding the sheep. You find one stuck in the hedge or find one upside down, you've got to tip it up, and or there's one missing and we have to stop the broadcast and go and find it. But all's well that ends well, as William said, my old mate William Shakespeare. So let's move forward and we'll go and have a look through some of the arable crops and some of the other habitats. Yep, gate opens well. Look at the lovely way that swings.
Good hinge. Good hinge work.
Good hinge work. And it stops. Yep. So if you just pan up here, Andrew, you can just see behind me here, we're going to talk about wildflower margins. And if we look here on the right, you'll see the first, this is a hazel tree when it's about 8 or 9 years old, and you'll see how straight those posts are, and that will probably be ready for coppicing in the winter. Always coppice and do any work to our trees sort of between November and February, March, when the leaves are all died off it. The tree's in in a sleeping mode, or it's in a dormancy mode, and then of course you can probably hear some of the songbird on these trees. We won't be doing work on these in the summer, because that's when birds are nesting and that's when the tree's growing at its most, and we want them to use its photosynthesis to gather in all that carbon dioxide. So yeah, we've got some different shrubs in here. So we've got things like dog rose, we've got some privet here which is flowering with a white flower on it, we've got bramble in there, we've got hazel, as I said, we've got maple, we've got a whole host of things. Some of the taller trees in there as well. We've got goat willow, so some of the taller trees in the back there that are growing very quickly, and they grow 3 or 4 times quicker than some of the other trees and shrubs, and they can actually be quite pesty sometimes because they grow so quick and they shelter out everything else. But what's really good about them is they have some really early pollen on them, so when these trees flower, they sometimes are flowering in February and March. And so if you get some nice still warm days in February and March and you get some early emerging bumblebees, out they come, and they can use these sorts of flowers early in the season, and probably at the other end when you've got things like ivy about. There's a whole spectrum of things. So there'll be wildflower margins like this for them to feed off, trees and shrubs, and also some of the crops. And if we wander into the crop here, we'll see that how the crops can provide pollen and nectar for bees. We won't probably see much today because it sits down, but there's a butterfly just flying out. Yeah, well done, Fred. Going up there, there's a tortoise shell. But you'll see these beans. He's actually showing us the way.
The bumblebee. Here we go.
You see one? Oh yes, down here, just in here. He's just flying around in there. We'll probably see a few more actually from here. So if you look at this as a spring-grown crop of spring beans, obviously, and we've been complaining about the weather, and it's been really dry. But you'll see now, look how that water's got into the soil. So I'm really pleased with the rain. We've had some heavy showers yesterday, really heavy. But these flowers in here are really useful for pollinators. And there are other little insects around in here, but bees especially. And so not only beans, but oilseed rape as well, that yellow flower, and they're really good for pollinators. And I think it's one of the issues that we've got with some of the techniques and some of the things we're allowed to put on seed dressings and insecticides, where the balance between controlling the pest and making sure we don't harm those beneficials to our crops is really in the balance. And we're seeing at the moment very difficult to grow lots of acres of oilseed rape, so you'll see a lot of that disappearing. And whilst it might be great for certain things, there could be a really big impact on some of our pollinators. So we have to make sure we get that right balance between being able to grow the crop, provide the pollination, provide the food. But this crop in here is in a trial, and it's in 3 plots. So this plot we're standing in is a direct drilled plot, which has had, yeah, I'm just looking, yeah, so it's got quite a lot of straw left in here, and we haven't cultivated the field very much. And then we do a little bit more cultivation until we do the ploughing plot at the top. And we're looking at earthworms, greenhouse gas, we're looking at compaction in the soil, we're looking at profitability, how much food it produces, what the yield is. So a whole host of things. I've just spotted another bee here, Andy. We've got to go and show. See if we can zoom in on this one here. You can see it. In fact, there's 2 or 3 here. You can see this fella here, and his mate, and another one over there. So yeah, the old bumblebees doing really well, even though it was raining not 20 minutes ago. So yeah, great for pollinators, and great for the environment, and also pollinating the crop, setting the pods for me. Crop's very low actually, it's been so dry that it's quite stunted. I'm expecting these crops to really take off now, and hopefully provide me with a good financial gross margin. This food can either go into animal feed or it can go into a snack. There's a lot of interest in roasting beans. It's very similar to a peanut. You can put lots of dressings on them, or lightly salt them. Really nice snack. You'll see them around in shops now, really gaining a bit of marketplace. So, with more ado, Andrew, let's just have a quick look at some of our grass margin and the flower margin. So some of these, we've got a mixture of things in here, and I will admit we have got a few thistles as well, but flowering thistles aren't too bad as well. So we've got some umbellifers and things like wild carrot. We've got things like some of the grasses. We've got some timothies and some Yorkshire fog. We've got some campions here, and some of these are just going over now. So they've flowered and they're beginning to set seed. Teasels are this one here, and we'll talk about teasels. I call it weasels for teasels. Okay. Nothing to do with heffalumps and wurzels, but the weasels for teasels thing is that all this habitat is providing a hiding place for small animals, and obviously then the food chain which comes on there. I've just seen some clovers as well here, and some lucernes, and we've had different, and then some. You can see there's several different types of clover in here. Some of the annual clovers were crimson clover, but now you've got things like bird's foot trefoil, as-like clover, and more arable productive clovers like lucerne, and you can see them around here. But these teasels I was talking about, you see how they're very short now. When we get up on another piece of the ground, in fact we'll wander over here because it will describe it perfectly, Andrew. So here we go, we've even got some bumblebees that are working in this flower margin at the moment here, and yeah, here we go, down here by my finger, Andrew, and there's another one just in front of you here. Last year in this plot, when there was a lot of the annual things like Phacelia, this was a total purple colour. We reckon there was 2 or 3 bees per metre square. At the moment you've probably got, I don't know, one. It's very difficult because there's not a lot of flowers around at the moment, but even now it's not very difficult to find bees in here. But we reckon there was 2 or 3 for every square metre in this last year when it was in full flower. That meant in this 100 metre section there was nearly 5,000 bees. That is buzzingly brilliant. It's fantastic. So that's the commercial pollen mix. Here's one that's a little bit more mature and still attracting some pollinators in here. This is what happens in year 2 with the teasel. So it shoots up and it provides, on year 1 it stays very small to the ground, almost like that. And in year 2 it starts to shoot up. And this is one from year 3 actually, but it does illustrate the seed head. You can just see this new seed head on here, and what will actually be happening is that this will have a very nice purple flower on it. Bumblebees absolutely love it, so do peacock butterflies, and so come August time, when this has got a big head like this with purple flowers on it, fantastic for those pollinators. Then in the winter time you're going to get things like finches, which will land on these and use all the seeds on here. These are very little fine seeds, and their beaks are designed to eat these. Fantastic. So in here we've got many more umbellifers, so you know, some of the cow parsleys, some of the wild carrot. I'll have a look and see if we pick up self here. We've got knapweed, which is this one here, which has a very purple flower on it. In fact, some of this is last year's knapweed heads on them, and the flower is a very bright purple flower. Most of it's probably not quite in or gone over it. It's quite a short flowering period, but we've got some that's already done and some that's coming into flower. So some of these will be coming into flower. So you've got the oxeye daisies here as well, which are great for things like hoverflies and parasitic wasps. As are these umbellifers. These umbellifers are really good for parasitic wasps and hoverflies as well, because what we're looking to try and find is things like hoverflies that mimic. They look a little bit like a hummingbird crossed with a wasp, if I can put that. Obviously not as big as either of them. They're really quite small. But they love these sorts of plants, and so when we're talking about trying to reduce the amount of inputs and insecticides on some of our own crops, rather than possibly looking at this mixture here, Andrew, which is a nice flowering mix, we may well decide to go with mixtures like this with more of these in, which provide a lot more for parasitic wasps, hoverflies, which are really good at taking out some of our aphids, taking out some of our crop pests. So these will attract crop pest predators, really good. So let's wander through here, Andrew, and just got the top. That's our final, we'll have a little bit of a panorama view of the top, and then we'll call it a day. Yeah, so sometimes over the winter you look at this and you think, oh, it's just full of just rubbish. But when you see it flowering like this, it really does make it all worthwhile, the time and effort we put in. And you can see now some of the shrubs there as well are flowering as well, so it makes it a real good balance around the edge of our fields where we're growing food, to be able to sort of framework our fields as a benefit to the environment. Yeah, so this last plot here in the spring beans is a ploughed plot, and you can see that you can't really pick up much difference. Probably a little better emergence rate this year on the flower plot. If you can come up here, Andrew, just pan around. We'll do a 360 for everybody, and then we'll talk in a little bit of detail. This is our last stop on our virtual farm walk. So let's start with this plot here. So we have a beetle bank on this side here, full of teasels and tussocky grasses, up to 1,200 insects, beetles and spiders in there, which can go out into the field and hopefully help us with our crop pests. In here we've just sown, whereas a couple of weeks ago it's been waiting for rain. We've got a few weeds coming up, and we've sown a wild bird seed mix, but we can just see some of them just emerging at the moment. Probably another 2 or 3 days when that rain's now soaked in, they'll start germinating. We've direct drilled one in there, another beetle bank, another crop of spring beans, and if we wander around, Andrew, here, we'll wander over here. So what we've got here is we've got a crop of spring oats, we've got a wild bird cover, and there's some clovers coming up in there. And then around the edges of these fields we've sown a green headland mix. Because it was so wet, we decided not to grow a crop in there and just try and restructure the soil, and that's just coming through. But these spring oats, they'll get put into porridge. We grow for a number of companies that supply all sorts of cereals. We do a lot of work with Kellogg's, we've done work with Jordan's, we've done a lot of work with people who are supplying your breakfast cereals. But we've also got winter beans in the next field, and then the field beyond that is wheat. And you can see we've got hedgerow habitats, which are very good for farming birds. And actually we might just take a minute, just see whether we can just see quite a few birds singing in the background. So this is a place where the food is grown, but in amongst it all is habitats where we're growing flowers, grass buffer strips, places for insects, pollinators. Also, we haven't talked about water and buffering watercourses and keeping water clean, but hopefully that just gives you an idea of what's going on at Loddington. Hopefully we've kept it down to about just over half an hour, and hopefully when we're all open you can come and see us and we can have a real good chinwag about the things we do at the Allerton Project that are great for British farming, great for British wildlife. Thank you, over and out, back to the studio.